A lot has changed over the last month, so I'm bringing you my top 40 updated running back tier list and rankings. If you're new to this 4for4 Fantasy Football YouTube channel, we are on the way to 500 subscribers. This is a brand new channel, so hit the like, hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. We're going to be posting daily here over the next month. We started off in the S tier, where we have Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, and CMC. Starting it off with Bijan Robinson. He was the prince that was promised out of the University of Texas, and we're heading right now into year 3 of Bijan Robinson, which is absolutely crazy to say. And last year, finished as the RB3 on a points per game basis. Absolutely electric. They used him in every way possible. 304 rushing attempts, 61 receptions, and I think the ceiling is still higher. I think he can still achieve ultimate game-breaking 22, 23 fantasy points per game. He was already pretty much a league winner last season, but I think at this value, I am projecting him to be the RB1 in fantasy football. I think a lot of people right now in the space are, and the main reason people are is because he has that reception upside. And if you look at the backfield committee mate that he has, it's Tyler Algier, and we're pretty much banking on Bijan Robinson finishing where he did last year. We had a 76% snap share, was RB4 in a snap share last year. So absolutely give me those opportunities, and the fact that he had the number 1 weighted opportunities over on Player Profiler tells you all you need to know. Bijan Robinson's in there when it matters the most. Now, moving on to the second player in this tier, it is going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. And yes, Jahmyr Gibbs has that pest teammate in David Montgomery that we have to worry about vulturing touchdowns. But the part about Jahmyr Gibbs that we love is, even though last year he finished as the RB2 on a fantasy points per game basis with 21.4, and this is all in full PPR rankings, I think there is still a ceiling that he has not achieved. I think he still has that 23 to 24 fantasy points per game season in him. And the reason that I'm saying that is because we're talking about a guy, Jahmyr Gibbs, who came out of college being compared to like a prime Alvin Kamara, and only in these first 2 seasons for Jahmyr Gibbs, he's only had 52 receptions those years. Now, there's a ton of pass catching weapons for this Detroit Lions team, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and Jameson Williams. So I'm not saying that Jahmyr Gibbs needs to be used out of the backfield, but I do think the way that Jahmyr Gibbs can improve, because last year did have 20 total touchdowns on the year. We'll have to see how much more touchdown upside he has. I don't think there's that much, but I do think where he can absolutely make his money and make his bread and butter is by adding a few more receptions. Even if this year he could potentially get to 60 receptions, we could be talking about Jahmyr Gibbs being that RB1 overall. My RB3 in the rankings are going to be Saquon Barkley, and Saquon Barkley reminded everybody of who he was last season, finishing with 22.2 fantasy points per game. He was the RB1 on a fantasy points per game basis, 345 rushing attempts for over 2,000 yards, 5.8 yards per carry, 33 receptions, 278 receiving yards, 15 total touchdowns. Now you're going to say, Caleb, why do you have Saquon Barkley behind Bijan Robinson, behind Jahmyr Gibbs? Because we have not seen a running back finish as the RB1 in fantasy football since 2010. So him bouncing back and repeating as the RB1 overall, super unlikely. But he is a talent. He is playing for this absolutely electric Philadelphia Eagles team. And so I want to be taking a shot. I want to be taking a shot on him, but I still prefer Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, especially with their age going into this year 3 season. We're looking at Saquon Barkley, who is 28.5, will be turning 29 this year, so he's kind of going to the back end of his career, which isn't bad. He definitely has less miles, especially with some of those injuries that he sustained early on in his career with the Giants. I just have Saquon Barkley here sliding in as my running back 3, but I still think he's a very good value, and if you get him, you have to be very happy about it. Now, RB4 for me, and this is a big move up the ranking, it is going to be CMC for the San Francisco 49ers. And we're talking about CMC, same thing with Saquon Barkley. We haven't really seen CMC, like, he's going up there in age, but we haven't seen him produce elite level fantasy points like we did with Saquon Barkley last season, because he only put up 12 fantasy points, lost a lot of people their leagues because you drafted him with pick 1, 2, 3. Now, if you look at what this 49ers team has done this offseason, they pretty much, we see Deebo Samuel walk away. They trade him away to the Commanders. We have Brandon Ayuk still recovering from his injury. We have Ricky Pearsall battling injury. Juwan Jennings wants a new contract. George Kittle, Mr. Old Reliable, is still there. Isaac Guerrero in the backfield to getting a little bit nicked up. I just feel like this team's going to have to rely on Christian McCaffrey as the main guy that I would be targeting. And because of that, and because they're going to have to rely on Christian McCaffrey, I understand it's a little risky. My man's is 29 years old and has been last year battled injuries. 2023 and 2022 were really good for Christian McCaffrey, but But if you go all the way back to 2021, 2020, like that man got riddled with injuries and kind of got labeled an injury risk. And then he kind of beat it for 2 seasons and then he got back into it. And so I think he has that overall RB1 overall upside still. Like we've seen elite level running backs like a Christian McCaffrey, like a LaDainian Thompson, like a Marshall Faulk, like somebody that like him where he can get those receptions when he plays in a full season and they can just use him all over the field, be super productive even into their early 30. For me, I'd rather take a shot on Christian McCaffrey after these top 3 guys clearly. But then that's kind of my S tier. I think that's the elite level tier before we move on to this A tier. And if you want to use the 4for4 website, which absolutely has helped me win championships the last 3 to 4 years, go check out the 4for4 website at 4for4.com and use code YouTube, which will give you 25% off of any membership, which we absolutely want you to do because that's the resources that I use in these videos to help make these rankings. And it's going to be used exactly what you want. We're going to have custom rankings, trade tools, projections week in and week out. Like there's so many tools that I could talk about here, but in the short little span, go check out the 4for4 website. Now moving on to the A tier, we do have Derrick Henry starting it off, Mr. 31.6 years of age, Derrick Henry, who finished last season as the RB4 on a points per game basis. We saw Derrick Henry, his yards per carry went. We saw his rushing yards go up. We saw his rush attempts go up, and he was playing in one of the best offenses that Derrick Henry's ever played on. It's crazy that as you get older, and as we're sitting here in 2024, that Derrick Henry's yards per carry went up to 5.9. We haven't seen it that high literally since 2020. That's almost a 4-year gap, which is like unheard of for running. And so going forward, I don't know how to protect Derrick Henry other than to say that he's an absolute animal and that he's going to be playing in a really good offense for this Baltimore Ravens. So give me Derrick Henry here sliding in, starting off my A tier. Next guy in this tier for me, it is going to be Achane for the Miami Dolphins. And when we talk about Devon, I think I'm starting to warm up a lot more to Devon in the second round area of your redraft leagues. He's probably going to end up being a back end first, which might be a little bit harder for me to kind of swallow. But the fact of the matter is RB5 and RB6 over the last 2 seasons on a points per game basis. And I think you could look at both those seasons and really have issues with the fact that he got injured in that 2023 campaign. In 2024, he plays without Tua Tagovailoa, and his absolute splits with Tua and without Tua are completely different players. And if we honestly had Devon with Tua for the full season, I think we could have been talking about Devon as the RB2, RB1 on a points per game basis. I think the range of outcomes for Devon could have been way different if he did have Tua. Last season, we saw that offense absolutely fall apart when Tua Tagovailoa was no longer the quarterback. We saw that for Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle. The only player that pretty much was able to sustain it was Jonnu Smith. But I want to take another shot on Achane. I think a lot of people, maybe they're going to be drafting, Devon over Derrick Henry. But I just want to be taking Devon here because I think if you miss out on those top 4 guys, Devon is a similar level range player to be able to get you there. Same with Derrick Henry. I like those 2 guys. Moving on to the next guy here in this A tier, it is going to be Ashton Jeanty, rookie level running back for the Las Vegas Raiders. And when we're looking at the Raiders specifically, they bring in Pete Carroll and they bring in Chip Kelly, 2 guys that absolutely love to run the ball. They draft Ashton Jeanty with a top 6 pick. So I want to be taking a shot on Ashton Jeanty. I think they're going to run the ball a ton. We look at this offense. Not only do you have Brock Bowers, they draft Jack Besh, you got Jacoby Myers, but there's really no one else in this backfield besides Raheem Mostert to compete with. I think they're going to rely heavily on the run. I think anytime you've seen Chip Kelly in the NFL, he had a top 10 rushing attempt team. And so I want to give I understand we're taking putting the value in a rookie level running back, but when we saw this last rookie level running back like a Bijan Robinson, you were having to draft him as the second running back, third running back off the board. And I think getting Ashton Jeanty in this range of your drafts, especially like we said, sliding in here as my RB7 is absolutely appropriate here in the A tier. So S tier, A tier down, feel very comfortable about it. Now, when we move to the B tier, there's a bunch of guys in this list. We got Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown, Josh Jacobs, Kyren Williams, Bucky Irving. Starting off with Jonathan Taylor, the Indianapolis Colts are absolutely on what I would like to say like sleeper watch for being a top 15 level offense that no one's expecting. And you got a lot of good reports coming out of camp of Anthony Richardson, which arguably a lot of people are going to say that Anthony Richardson's going to steal goal line work from Jonathan Taylor. I mean, we look at last season, dude in 14 games put up 12 total touches, 17.6 fantasy points per game was the RB7. Even if he can just repeat what he did last year, where I have him currently ranked here as the RB8, I feel like we have him at his floor. But what is exciting is what if this offense is way better than expected? What if Shane Steichen in year 3 can absolutely get things humming? I'm excited for Jonathan Taylor. I think RB8 feels really good. RB9 for me is going to be Chase Brown. When we look at this Bengals team, I understand they draft Taj Brooks, but it's going to be the Chase Brown show. And there's a lot of guys in the fantasy space that I absolutely love listening to. Ron Stewart, a Fantasy Stock Exchange. I'm really good friends with both Corey and Danny. And I mean, they just put out a recent video where they talked about Chase Brown and how Chase Brown could be this year's like Saquon Barkley, and the fact that he surprises a lot of people with his value that he's currently at. I mean, you're having to draft him in the early part of the third round, but I have him, like I said, sliding in right here as my RB9. Last season, 15.9 fantasy points per game, RB14, nothing crazy to talk about. But when you start to dive into the actual metrics, he was the RB6 in targets. So he's getting opportunities in the passing game. There's a lot of, total RB5 in receptions, total touchdowns, he was RB12. But when you started to look at weighted opportunities, he was RB11. So weighted opportunities kind of talks about, how much importance these touches are, as well as opportunity share. He was RB10. So all in all, this guy is a top 12 running back when it comes to the overall volume, and they didn't add anybody of significance. And I just continue to think that this Bengals team, with how bad the defense is going to be for the Bengals, as somebody that is a Bengals fan, the defense is going to be terrible, that they're going to have to rely heavily on Chase Brown and on T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow just to get anything humming. So I absolutely love Chase Brown here at RB10. For me, it's going to be Josh Jacobs. We saw Josh Jacobs put this Green Bay Packers offense on his back. We saw Jordan Love absolutely struggle last year. So Josh Jacobs, a year older, 27.4 years old, 17.2 fantasy points per game though. RB8 last season with 301 rushing attempts. He maintained his health the whole season, 17 games played. So super reliable running back. We had seen some injury issues in 2023. So, and even last year, if you look at the overall injury report for him, he did deal with a quad injury, as well as an ankle injury, and he did play through all of dude was super reliable last season. So I do want to give the benefit of the doubt there for Josh Jacobs as my RB10. Kyren Williams just got that massive new deal. The only thing that is, I think, in this tier hesitating me for pushing up Kyren Williams over guys like Josh Jacobs and Chase Brown is purely based on we don't know what's happening with Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford is still battling this injury. Is he going to play week 1, week 2, week 3, or is this going to be something that's going to be lasting the whole season? While you say, oh man, that's going to help the overall volume of Kyren Williams, I would agree with that. He probably would get more touches. The thing that I don't like about it would be the overall efficiency that Kyren Williams would have to deal with maybe some more stacked boxes. And I mean, like we said last year, RB10 on a points per game basis, RB2 the year before. I'm not saying that he can't do it. I'm not saying that this offense can't run through Kyren Williams, but when you're looking at what we've seen him able to do with Matthew Stafford, especially when you look at the overall total touchdowns, 15 and 16 over the last 2 seasons, I'm a little bit more hesitant to put Kyren Williams a little bit higher. And so as these rankings are fluid, as we're updating them, as we approach the season, when we put together our RB rankings video a little bit later on in August, again with our updated rankings, we'll have to kind of see where Kyren Williams falls. Last guy in this tier is going to be Bucky Irving. We see Liam Cohen move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and now the question remains is, does Bucky take even more of a snap share after that RB19 kind of amazing sleeper season that he just put up? We'll have to see. The one thing that I think is going to hinder Bucky from hitting absolute crazy thresholds is going to be, what does this touchdown metrics look like? Because last year only had 8. If he can get to 12, 14, 15, I think we could be talking about it being pretty electric, because we did even see, even though Rachaad White had a ton of receptions last season, Bucky Irving also had 47. So Baker Mayfield was checking the ball down to both Bucky and Rachaad White, especially if Bucky can get even more snap share, if he can even get more opportunity share, because last year he only had a 45.7% snap share. Let's say this thing goes up to 60. We could see Bucky Irving's value absolutely fly up. I just think it's a little bit more risky, and so that's kind of why I have him here at the bottom of the B tier. Moving on to the C tier, we started off with Breece Hall for the Jets. And when we're talking Breece Hall specifically, you got to talk Justin Fields. What is this offense going to look like? Is Breece Hall going to have the amount of touches that we are expecting for Breece Hall, especially with the reports that Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis are doing really good? I think this is appropriate. Last year, people were drafting Breece Hall as that top 3, top 4 running back. This year, he gets that boost down for me as RB13. Still think he has a limited upside. I mean, we saw an RB6 finish in 2023. We saw an RB17 on a points per game finish in 2024. So I kind of have him slanted right in the middle. I think that's an appropriate level ranking, but he does have a ton of upside. So I do put him here in the tier because I do prefer him over these other guys in the tier when we're talking James Cook, Alvin Kamara, Omarion Hampton. Now, next guy is going to be James Cook. He has been sitting out of practice the last 2-3 days. Just a lot of talk about this contract extension. My worry with James Cook more than anything is going to be the touchdown regression. I don't know if he can repeat having the insane amount of touchdowns that he had last season when we specifically talk about 18 touchdowns, because 3 in 2022, 6 in 2023, then in 2024 had 18. So it's hard for me to push him up that high because we know he got a ton of touchdowns, and he was only the RB11 with that jump in touchdowns. So I feel like RB11 might be like if things go absolutely well. And so having him here as RB14 kind of feels like maybe a little bit lesser of a season than last season. But then I could also argue that I need to have Alvin Kamara higher. And Alvin Kamara, the worry with him specifically is that this New Orleans Saints team is not going to be. It's that Tyler Shough or Spencer Rattler, whoever it is running the quarterbacks, is not going to be able to pass the ball. So they're going to have to rely heavily on the running game. And even though the offense was bad last year in the 14 games that he played, RB5, RB3 the year before that, he's been Mr. Consistent when it comes to points per game over the last 2 seasons. He is also getting up there in age. He's 30 years old. He might still be the best pass catching option that they have. I know a lot of people like some Chris Olave, some Rashid Shaheed, but if this team's not able to push the ball down the field, they might just have to get the ball to Alvin Kamara. So I have him sliding in here at my RB15. At RB16 is going to be Omarion Hampton, and Omarion Hampton makes a huge jump from our last video. Major reason is we saw some decent things in the Hall of Fame game from Omarion Hampton. Of course, he wasn't able to score, tried to bounce it outside, did not necessarily work, but we're seeing Najee Harris not quite get involved, a lot of just still walking around the field. So we're seeing Omarion Hampton just continue to build up days with the ones, and we always talk about all it takes for a guy like an Omarion Hampton to absolutely exclude and pass a guy like a Najee Harris is just some opportunity. And usually for a rookie level running back, whether they're drafted in the first, second, third round, we usually expect more of that takeover at the second half of the season. But specifically with Omarion Hampton being that top 25 draft pick that he was, but also adding on the fact that we see Najee Harris, like we said, not practicing right now, I think all wheels are up for Omarion Hampton. And I'm willing to take a shot at this ADP because if Omarion Hampton absolutely takes the reins, runs with it, is absolutely dominant in this Greg Roman team, I'm excited. That's all I'm going to say. I think it was hard for me not even to push him up higher, but I think this is probably the appropriate ranking right now in my C tier. We'll have to see. Omarion Hampton is somebody that I absolutely love for 2025 fantasy football. Now we move it on to the D tier, and the D tier is a little bit of a bigger tier of a bunch of guys that I kind of have sliding in this mid RB2 range. We got James Conner, Kenneth Walker, Chuba Hubbard, RJ Harvey, TreVeyon Henderson, Joe Mixon, Isiah Pacheco, and David Montgomery. Starting it off specifically with James Conner. James Conner has also, at the same way that we talk about Alvin Kamara, has been super reliable, Mr. Reliable. In this age 30 season, we'll have to see how he does, but he's finished RB9, RB13, and RB15 over the last 3 seasons. He's going to get somewhere probably around that 200 to 220 rushing attempts, probably finish around 1,000 yards, and get somewhere between 7 to 9 touchdowns. Now, the question mark of does he finish higher on a points per game basis really comes to how many receptions is he actually going to be able to get? Because we've seen in some previous years he finishes, in the high 40s, the 46 to 48 mark. Other years we've seen him finish kind of in that 27 to 30 mark. So for me, with Kyler Murray, a lot of the idea around this offense has been to try to rely on the passing attack. Really, it always kind of comes back to James Conner. Now, there's also a lot of talk about Trey Benson, and Trey Benson showing a lot more explosion than we've seen in previous years, and them wanting to get him involved because he was a 3rd-round pick going into this kind of year 2. I still want to be taking a shot on James Conner. I think this is an appropriate level ranking for him in the D tier. Next guy at 18 is going to be Kenneth Walker. And Kenneth Walker was dealing with a little bit of an injury. I think it was some calf soreness where he was out a few practices, but now he's back. Kenneth Walker, if we talk from a pure talent perspective, I think we'd all agree that when he's out there, it looks really good. We just haven't seen that similar level of production on a fantasy points per game basis. And so going forward, we're just going to have to be taking shots on him at this value because last year, RB12 on a points per game basis, RB20, RB16 the year before that. And so me sliding him in here at RB18, I'm just kind of banking on the fact that Clint Kubiak might want to pass the ball a little bit more. We saw last year, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet kind of split. How much impact does Zach Charbonnet have? Because Zach Charbonnet, let's not forget, was drafted in the 2nd round. Like this is not, both him and Kenneth Walker were drafted in the 2nd round back-to-back years. So they have about the same amount of draft capital in them. Now, while I agree with most of you that are watching this, that Kenneth Walker is the better running back, I do just have him here sliding as my RB18. RB19 is going to be Chuba Hubbard, who sneakily got that big mega extension from the Panthers. We saw Bryce Young absolutely emerge at the second half of the season, and we see them add Ted McMillan. So they make a priority to add a pass catcher on offense after seeing Chuba Hubbard put up the best fantasy football season that he's had with 16.1 fantasy points per game, was the RB13, 43 receptions, 250 rushing attempts, 1,195 yards. The part that makes me really excited is that Chuba Hubbard was what we like to call a workhorse, ladies and gentlemen. He was RB3 on a snap share, RB4 on an opportunity share over on Player Profiler. Absolutely incredible numbers. RB8 on rushing yards. Dude was absolutely dominant. And the thing is, he was RB9 and on route to run run and also route participation. So when they're throwing the ball in those high leverage situations as well on third down, he was also out there. So as we kind of look, we see, Jonathan Brooks is still going to be recovering from the ACL. They do bring in Rico Dowdle, but not that I'm like scared for Chuba Hubbard with Rico Dowdle. I think the question is what we saw last season enough for us to continue pushing them forward? And are the Panthers going to take that next step as an offense? So Chuba Hubbard here as my RB19. RB20 is going to be RJ Harvey. This team for the Denver Broncos, Sean Payton selected RJ Harvey in the second round, way ahead of, I would have taken Kaleb Johnson there, to be completely honest, but Sean Payton zeroed in on his guy and he went and he took him. And so you got to respect it. And the Denver Broncos did sign J.K. Dobbins. So there's a little bit of is it going to be more 50-50? Is J.K. Dobbins probably the one you want to know? I know J.K. Dobbins has had some really great glowing reports coming out of training camp. I'm just taking a bet on R.J. Harvey here at RB20. At RB21, it's going to be TreVeyon Henderson, who also is getting very glowing reports from the Patriots as not only a pass catcher, but also how he's able to block on third downs. I think it's going to be pretty clear that he is going to pass Rhamondre Stevenson when it comes to this overall offense. So give me some TreVeyon Henderson as my RB21, high upside. Jahmyr Gibbs light, as somebody that watched him all throughout college, absolutely electric. Talked about him a little bit more in my video yesterday in greater detail if you want to check that out. At RB22, it is going to be Joe Mixon. And Joe Mixon is battling an injury. We don't know how serious this injury is going to be for Joe Mixon. So this feels like the appropriate range, but Joe Mixon could fall even further as we approach drafts, not knowing what his situation is. We're seeing good things out of Nick Chubb and Woody Marks in camp, but RB22 feels appropriate. RB23 is going to be Isiah Pacheco, who makes a big bum rush back up the board for me. Major thing is some of this training camp shoutouts that are happening. It doesn't seem like any of the guys behind Isiah Pacheco, like a Brashard Smith, who was a lot of people's sleeper picks heading into the season, is anything to be scared about. You still have a guy like Elijah Mitchell, but I still think we could see, with him 1 year fully removed from the injury and recovering, him get back to that 15.3 fantasy points per game number that he had in 2023. So we'll have to just continue to monitor Isiah Pacheco. I mean, you always want somebody in this Kansas City Chiefs offense because you know they're going to be good. Have him here as my RB23. And RB24 is going to be Mr. Touchdown himself, David Montgomery. Now, if anything were to happen to either Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery, the other would absolutely get a boost up. Jahmyr Gibbs is already, being drafted there, but would be an absolute league winner if something happened to David Montgomery, whereas something happened to Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery would be an absolute league winner. Now, I've drafted plenty of Jahmyr Gibbs, so I'm not saying that in essence, but we do know David Montgomery can just pretty much sleep and fall in the end zone any given day game. We're probably looking at him in that RB, finishing with 10 to 12 total touchdowns this season. So RB24 especially feels appropriate. Now, when it comes to the E tier, we started off with Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones, another of these kind of 2017 running backs that just continue to be, you feel like they're aging out, but they just keep producing fantasy football points. RB20 on a points per game basis last season. And we see JJ McCarthy take over this Minnesota Vikings team. I think that's going to benefit the running attack, and especially a guy like Aaron Jones, who can be used out of the backfield, can also be used in the receiving game. They did bring in Jordan Mason, who we'll talk about in a little bit, who's been getting some pretty glowing reviews, but have to start him off in the E tier. RB26 is going to be DeAndre Swift for me. I understand competing with Kyle Malungai, Roschon Johnson, but let's get it not twisted, ladies and gentlemen. DeAndre Swift, if this team with Ben Johnson can take any sort of steps of being a little bit more relevant, just a little bit better, DeAndre Swift's going to be absolutely electric there at that RB26 spot. RB27 is going to be Tony Pollard. And as much as I'm starting to get a lot more excited about a Tyjae Spears and the potential too that Tony Pollard has kind of passed that age cliff, could fall off. Maybe Tyjae Spears is a little bit more better value. You got to take the guy here. He's got the contract, and the last 2 seasons has finished as RB22 and RB23 on a points per game basis. I'm even pushing him lower. So I feel like a ton of range there for Tony Pollard to return on value. Add the fact that Cam Ward gets added into this offense. Cam Ward's got to be better than what we saw out of Will Levis last season. So give me Tony Pollard as RB27. RB28 is going to be Kaleb Johnson, who gets that early third round draft capital to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We see Aaron Rodgers get brought into town. Kaleb Johnson versus Jaylen Warren. I think a lot of people are going to assume that Jaylen Warren's going to get the early work earlier on in the season, but similar talk to with an Omarion Hampton or, TreVeyon Henderson per se. I think we're going to see those guys absolutely erupt in the second half of the season. We always see that with the rookie level running backs, especially a guy like Kaleb Johnson, but he does have a little bit more touchdown upside than a guy like a Jaylen Warren. But for that zone scheme that the Pittsburgh Steelers like to run. Kaleb Johnson's an absolutely electric fit out of the University of Iowa. Now, last guy in this tier, in the E tier, it's going to be Tyrone Tracy. And there's been the discussions on the Twitterverse about Tyrone Tracy versus Cam Skattebo. Big thing with Tyrone Tracy. Let's not forget, 6th round pick last year, late 5th round. So essentially 6th round. Finished as the RB 31 on a points per game basis with 10.7. Now that was playing with Danny Dimes. I was playing with Tommy DeVito. Not only are we going to see Tyrone Tracy playing with a better quarterback, but hopefully a better offense as a whole. And yes, maybe Cam Skattebo eats into his overall opportunity share, but let's not get it twisted. Tyrone Tracy only had a 58.2% snap share last year. So it's not like, even if, Cam Skattebo gets a 45% snap share, it's not like that's going to be anything crazy that's really going to drive down Tyrone Tracy's overall value. And if this offense can take any steps, maybe Tyrone Tracy gets some more receptions or gets some more total touchdowns because this offense is just a little bit better. I think this overall ranking of Tyrone Tracy at RB29 is very, very appropriate. Now, this F tier is just a giant tier for me. So we're going to kind of go through this in depth. We got Bijan Robinson, Jaylen Warren, Cam Skattebo, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Jordan Mason, Rhamondre Stevenson, Tyjae Spears, Bhyashul Tuten, and then Jaydon Blue. Now, granted, if you guys are counting at home, that is 42 running backs. I told you 40. And the reason I added 42 is because I'm just trying to give you guys some extra gravy. I'm trying to get you guys some extra sauce. When it comes to Bijan Robinson, playing in that Jaden Daniels offense, if they can just be a little bit more electric, maybe Bijan Robinson falls into the end zone a little bit more than we're expecting. Jaylen Warren, same thing, competing in the backfield with touches with Kaleb Johnson. I think we all want to assume that this offense is going to be better for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but let's be real. We said the same thing about the Jets last year, and that did not turn things around for Breece Hall. So it's hard for me to say that Jaylen Warren is going to be the clear one, especially when you put early 3rd round draft capital into a projected workhorse like a Kaleb Johnson. Have to slide Jaylen Warren in here. RB32, Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo is dealing with a little bit of an injury. We're going to have to see what those splits with Tyrone Tracy look like, but I think you take a shot in your draft on one of these guys, one of them's going to pan out. So you got a 50-50 shot that you're getting the guy. And so take a shot on Cam Skattebo there as RB32. RB33, still going to put Najee Harris. As much as I like Omarion Hampton and I pushed Omarion Hampton up the boards, I think Najee Harris, even both of them should get enough run. Najee Harris should have some, low end flex value there. So I have him here as RB33. RB34, like we said, is going to be Travis Etienne. So when we're talking about Travis Etienne and then Tank Bigsby, I have back-to-back RB34, RB35. It's hard for me to know which of these guys in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense is going to be the starter. And I think there's a chance that it's Tank Bigsby. I think there's a chance that it's Travis Etienne. And if you're in a lot of drafts, hey, let's diversify. Let's take a shot on both of these guys, because I do think if Liam Cohen can get this offense cooking with Travis Hunter, Brian Thomas Jr., and Trevor Lawrence, even a guy like a Brenton Strange, I think there's going to be value for whoever that running back is. And you got 3 shots because there's 3 guys that could potentially do it. But I prefer Travis Etienne still currently over Tank Bigsby, but maybe that's a little bit just of like draft prospect bias from a few years ago, and just overall thinking that last year was just such a down season for Travis Etienne as a whole. Now, RB36, like we said, is going to be Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is getting a lot of glowing reports out of the Houston Texans camp. Major injuries, though, that Nick Chubb is recovering from. And you add in the fact that we don't know what this offensive line situation is going to be like for CJ Stroud. Of course, they let Laramie Tunsil, they trade him to the Commanders, so clearly they had a plan in place. They kind of addressed it in the draft. I'm still worried for CJ Stroud. I'm still worried, and you see the jerseys behind me, like I'm worried for CJ Stroud. Like I'm worried for Nick Chubb, even Joe Mixon. Like I don't think this is the best offensive line, but you have to slide Nick Chubb kind of in here going forward. Next guy, RB37, is going to be Javonte Williams. We're assuming a lot of hype's coming out about Jaydon Blue, who we have as our RB42. Both of those guys are close. So as we approach, and this is kind of where the rankings are going to be fluid, as we approach the season, there's a chance that Jaydon Blue makes a pretty big rise, even over a guy like Javonte Williams. But I think if I had to bank on it, I think Javonte Williams would be the starter week 1. RB38 is going to be Jordan Mason, who, as much as we love some Aaron Jones, we're also been hearing some really great things about Jordan Mason in camp. RB2 right now for the Minnesota Vikings, but JJ McCarthy being a first-time starter, year 2 in the NFL, like they're probably going to have to rely on the run. And so Jordan Mason could be a little bit more of that early down work, especially if they're wanting to save Aaron Jones for those pass catching attempts and maybe for a little bit later on in the season. So Jordan Mason, this ranking could be criminal as we approach the season. RB39 is going to be Rhamondre Stevenson, who I think at this point it's pretty clear like TreVeyon Henderson is going to be getting a lot of the work. But if you don't remember, TreVeyon Henderson this last year with Ohio State, with him, both him and Quinshon Judkins ran about a 50-50 split pretty evenly down the board. So I wouldn't be surprised if Rhamondre Stevenson was getting a lot more of the early down work. I know there's the fumbling issues. I also know that this is not the regime that gave him that contract extension. So probably clearly going to be the RB2, but I think there could be some value if this New England Patriots are a sneaky top 20 offense, that Rhamondre Stevenson provides some value here at the RB39 spot. RB40 overall, it's going to be Tyjae Spears for the Tennessee Titans. And Tyjae Spears is somebody that I'm falling a little bit more in love with each and every day, thinking that he's probably a lot more explosive than Tony Pollard, that he might be the better fit next to Cam Ward in the backfield. And there's a chance that you wait almost, 12, if you're looking at my rankings, like 12 players, 12 running backs specifically down the board, and Tyjae Spears is the one that you actually want. And so that's the interesting thing. We'll have to kind of see how this preseason goes. Tyjae Spears, though, feeling very appropriately here at RB40. RB41 is going to be still Bhyashul Tuten for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's not forget that Gladstone specifically said in his interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars, I want Bhyashul Tuten. That's a guy that I would add to my offense that can be absolutely electrifying. They got him in the early 4th round. I know a lot of people don't like drafting running backs that were drafted in the 4th round, but let's not forget that this year's draft class was absolutely loaded. So there was a chance that in a normal, like kind of poor to mid running back class, that Bhyashul Tuten was actually a 3rd round pick. If we're just, maybe I'm just dealing with my own sense that he fell to the 4th round. But I think in this Jacksonville Jaguars team, like I said, he maybe might be the most explosive running back when it comes to Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, and him. So if he were to find a way to get on the field, if something were to happen to one of Travis Etienne or Tank Bigsby, I think Bhyashul Tuten's value absolutely goes skyrocketing. And right here is kind of where I have him as my RB41. And then RB42 is Jaydon Blue. And there was reports that Jaydon Blue was a little bit lazy learning the playbook early on in camp, but then all of a sudden reports come out this week, oh, he's starting to run with the ones. Jaydon Blue is looking really explosive. He's looking really good. Drafted to a great situation in the Dallas Cowboys team, which we know is going to be at a good offense where there's not a lot of good talent in front of him. We're talking Javonte Williams. We're talking Miles Sanders right now. I want to be taking a shot on Jaydon Blue if I have him, but that's kind of how I look at that. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. A lot of more content to be coming in the next few days, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.